Thankfully, by the way, we can laugh about this. In this day and age, I do not have to worry about this. I know we all have to worry about evacuations at school and, crisis situations. Our minds go to dark places. It's sad, but it's the world in which we live. But thankfully, we've gotten through that. Kids went back to class. Things returned to normal. And yes, I don't say this lightly. We pray every day when I drop my kids off for safety at school in all the schools in the area. It's sad, although it's great to pray, but it's sad we have to pray for that particular reason, but it's the world in which we live. Anyway, the detour of the detour. Somebody has to ask for forgiveness because there was an evacuation because they apparently created a fire and smoke in the microwave, much like literally that scene from Just Friends where we play our forgiveness soundbite. Right afterwards, the ditz who sang that song, she tried to put, this is a character, not person, by the way, tried to put an item in the microwave with the aluminum foil. That is where the Just Friends forgiveness song originated. So it's an appropriate day because this email comes from Lynchburg City Schools, and I get it, even though my kids are just in first grade. But the email is, it's football season. Check out these guidelines for fans. And it's about how to behave in a safe, family-friendly atmosphere, quote, for the good of the game, end quote. Now, look, 99% of us as fans or media members in our case here at the Virginia Talk Radio Network, or Trey's case as an official from the morning warm-up, Trey Lyle, we go to these games with a professional mindset anyway, but fans, for the most part, engage the correct way. But let's not get it twisted here. And we can discuss this with Ben Cates of newsadvance.com around 5:25 today. This email of, it's football season, check out these guidelines for fans, could have been sent out a couple of weeks ago because Heritage and Glass have already had home football games. It's being sent out today for one obvious reason. They play Friday in the Jug Bowl to kick off Seminole District play, which, I personally, I love rivalries at the end of the year, but I understand why the later in the year, the more the intensity of the playoffs kicks in, the more there could be intensity in this rivalry. And let's just say there have been spirited sides for both Glass and Heritage. Fans have lost their cool. More you'll be able to find out on the morning warm-up with Trey Lyle and our very own Ty Tracy, who played in this rivalry for Heritage. It's very spirited. They have to section off the Glass side of the stadium and the Heritage side. And again, for a lot of fans, they know how to carry themselves. But there's that select few that, I will use this in air quotes, they just can't contain themselves. Code for they're 18 and older, or at least old enough to know better if they're in their teens, and they choose not to contain themselves. So they have to be reminded by these emails that we can all roll our eyes at as abiding members of sports fandom. The select few that don't, this is why it's in place. And look, I actually give Lynchburg City Schools credit for sending an email out. I know we're kind of making fun of it, but it is a smart thing to do and to continue to reiterate that. And I give them credit as well for playing this game earlier in the year. I'd love it to be at the end of the year. I understand why it's not, but if you're not going to play a matchup like Glass Heritage at the end of the year, then if nothing else, there's a viable reason for it. Flip it around and make it the kickoff for Seminole District football. And that is one of the great ways to do it. JF against Liberty, that's a Bedford County battle. I know it's lopsided in years past. Recently, at least, JF has really dominated that rivalry in the JT Cruz era as they are now in the 5th season with him. And they are heavy favorites, and they should be, which you'll find out. Central VA Flooring kickoff show 6:30. JF football presented by TrostLaw.com at 7 o'clock this Friday. So, again, that's the case. But there are other rivalries. Battle for Timberlake Road between Brookville and Heritage. That's a great one. JF and Heritage is going to be wrapping up the season. That's fantastic. There are other ways to make these rivals. Amherst and EC Glass to wrap up the regular season in the Seminole District. I know it's not the same, but that rivalry goes back to when they both played in the Western Valley District years ago. So there are other ways around it. Again, in a perfect world, which that's why we're getting an email about it's football season, check out these guidelines for fans with Lynchburg City Schools. It's obviously not a perfect world. In a perfect world, all the big rivalries and all the big district rivalries face each other, teams face each other at the end of the year. But because of the need to be cautious, I understand that. And there are other, maybe second level rivalries that you can then have at the end of the year, which are still intense, but maybe not on that same level as Glass Heritage. And there's a way to work around it. And again, I think there are ways to tweak that schedule even more, but I get why this email was sent out. Now, back from our detour.
After Ed's potentially unnecessary detour, let's get back on the road in the fast lane.
I mean, let's not get it twisted. Virginia Tech's coaching search has dominated the landscape and will continue to dominate it in the fast lane. Obviously, where Liberty goes with their football season, how Virginia does. JMU, if they can make a bid for the college football playoff, they need to win at Liberty this weekend, and there are still some tickets available. Not as many, but there are still tickets for Liberty Flames football at InsaneRadioDeals.com now through tomorrow. 65% off the list price of Liberty Flames tickets, whether it's the JMU and the season passes or individual game tickets. Get them now at InsaneRadioDeals.com. But for Liberty, JMU, and Virginia, and we'll get to the who's in a moment, there's time for it. But from Virginia Tech's perspective, we played yesterday the Whit Babcock press conference where he did not take questions, but he basically just gave a statement. And then we played Philip Montgomery, and he went for about 20 minutes, but the part we played was Philip Montgomery talking about how they want to fine-tune things at practice, which it's no secret that's been an issue with Virginia Tech. But all of that goes to say that there is not a lot of clarity right now on who is actually in charge of this search, other than to say when President Tim Sands issued the statement, and then the search process features President Tim Sands of Virginia Tech, plus 2 members of the Board of Visitors, we're up to 3, and another interim rector, we're at 4, and then Whit Babcock will be consulted, but that might also be to transition to a new athletic director. It's more like this.
Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5.
Not 5. We don't even know. We're still trying to figure it out. So I love lists as much as anybody. I've started diving into lists of potential candidates. And at some point, whether Luke's with us in the fast lane or Trey or TJ or Ty or whomever, we can start getting into whom we would like, whom we would not. And there will be other openings that pop up and some that can pay more and have better structure that are going to jump ahead of Virginia Tech in terms of coaching candidate desirability. But for Virginia Tech, there's no need to rush into these type of lists. It's fun. We'll put them together. But I'm just saying that to get a level of perspective and keep that in the back of your mind right now. I think it's okay to have desired candidates. I'm already putting some in there that I like for Virginia Tech and some that make me leery. But in terms of unveiling it, I just don't feel the rush to do that when I can wait a couple of days, gather more info, and know that, last I checked, looking at my watch right now, Fastlane, Ed Lane, and VTR and Sports on Facebook Live to see it, it is September 17th. And this season still has 2.5 months before it concludes, or at least we get more coaching searches that open up. Only teams have had disastrous starts to the season, and I put 0-3 at Virginia Tech, and a loss where they gave up 62 unanswered between Vandy in the second half and ODU in the first half. I'd put that in the category of this. But, the rest of it, outside of that in UCLA, there will be openings that pop up, largely performance-based, but based on the amount of resources that are available. So keep that in mind. Meanwhile, we'll pivot off of that in just a moment. But speaking of pivoting, if you want to pivot to lower prices, InsaneRadioDeals.com. That blue light special we mentioned, it's in greater depth. Star City Half Marathon and 10K entries, already discounted from the $70 value. You'll get 65% off the list price at InsaneRadioDeals.com. Same with Liberty Flames tickets. Normally, game tickets, $38 value outside of the JMU game, but that's part of our season ticket plan for Liberty. Normally, there's a value. You're getting a discount off of that, and then on top of the discount, you're getting 65% more off in the fast lane. I'm so thinking about 66.6% off just because 666, mark of the beast, and we've gotten feedback, not always positive, when we've done it, but we appreciate people that listen. So just a little friendly reminder. Meanwhile, it's time to appropriately, when it comes to Virginia, maybe based on some of what I saw on Saturday at least, in terms of the fan behavior, but it might just be time now for us to get into the weeds and look at where the Virginia Cavaliers are going to go and how they are going there with their football season so far.
The haters say we get into the weeds. They may even say we get into the weed.
Smoke weed every day.
Nah, we love getting into the weeds to discuss some cool sports details here in the Fast Lane.
So where we are with the Virginia Cavaliers is that I don't know if we know whether this team is a good team or not. They played 3 games. They demolished Coastal Carolina, but this is not the Jamie Chadwell Coastal. I get it, Liberty. They've struggled 1-2 start this year. A little disappointing at 8-4 last year, and the wheels kind of came off over the back half of the season as the idea of some players checking out came to fruition and really bore itself out on the field, including in the bowl game against Buffalo. But for Liberty, that luster may have worn off, but he still is a good coach. But for Coastal, it's been a challenge. That was one of Virginia's wins. The other was William & Mary, which, again, going on the field before that game, it was as stark of a difference as I've seen two programs, even in a 1A versus 1AA matchup. Virginia looks as big as I've seen them, maybe since the tail end of the Al Groh era, which is when I first started covering college football back in the 2008, 2009 timeframe. They look so much bigger, Virginia does, than in recent years. Maybe a chunk of the Bronco Mendenhall era, including when Bryce Perkins was around, they had some decent size, but it wasn't quite on the high-end level. It was kind of exposed when they played against Clemson in the ACC championship game that year, and maybe to an extent as well in the loss in the Orange Bowl to Florida, although they were better. But this is as big as I've seen Virginia, and William & Mary as small as I've seen. So Virginia should have dominated that matchup. They did. Now, Coastal, a loss to NC State where the offense was really good outside of the interception late, but the defense had its struggles defending the run and the pass, and then a dominating victory against William & Mary. Those are our three data points when looking at Virginia so far to start this season. So I get the skepticism of how good they are. I think it's reasonable to be skeptical of that. But I'd also say this much. There were a number of signs about maturity for the players at Virginia, that I don't think is debatable. One of which is I understand that the Lavelle Davis Jr., Devin Chandler, and Deshaun Perry Day of Remembrance at Virginia carries a lot within a lot of folks at Virginia, particularly Coach Tony Elliott, who coached them in his first year on grounds, and the athletic department. But how they handle that, I think if there's anything, the one benefit of being such a transfer-laden roster of Virginia is a lot of these players, while I think they understand the significance of it, there's not the like, oh my goodness, we knew these people, so we know what the day means, but we can acknowledge that and then just lock in, whereas the emotions of the day are not likely to overtake them.
Super proud of the players in the locker room for taking ownership of something that they really didn't know or understand. But they know that they got Virginia on their chest, and they said they're going to carry the burden. And what we wanted to do today was to just bring glory to those guys' legacy.
And that's part of what you do if you're Virginia, is playing well. But this is a game where they should have done what they did. The Who's amassed over 700 yards of offense. I'll go over because it's technically 700 because of the kneel downs late that got it back to 700. But this could easily have been the coveted 737, like the holy grail of offensive productivity. I mean, that's where Virginia was. Granted, again, it's against William & Mary. But this was really impressive. And they shut down William & Mary. There was one point where it was 20-3 first downs on the game. I don't know where it finished up. I could go back and look at the stats. Again, I'll have to ask for forgiveness. Hopefully you'll grant it, and I'll get my usher on. But I don't remember it exactly. But, I mean, does it matter? I stopped counting at 20-3, and Virginia was winning this game in a laugher. They could have blown out William & Mary even more. They dialed it back as a mature coaching staff would do so that you don't add more wear and tear to your starters. But a lot of that's because, look, Virginia showed up prepared and early in this game, which is so important to remember.
An FCS opponent. You got UVA strong going on, ton of distractions, and kind of could have been feeling sorry for yourself for last week, coming up short, and they just showed up from the gate. Today and yesterday with all of our meetings, everything started early by 5 minutes. And our pregame meal, everybody was dressed and ready to go. And not that we've had any issues, but normally, you start right on time. But today, everything was early by 5 minutes, and the buses were packed and ready to go. The guys showed up. Their energy and pregame was very businesslike, which is a good thing to see and feel as a coach, because you know that your senior leadership, right, is really taking charge of the locker room.
That was Tony Elliott talking afterwards about the senior leadership, which are the players that are back in Virginia. That's where the impressive maturity, really the standard is set. I know they've got grad transfers and other players that they brought in.
Dollar bills, y'all.
With their NIL budget they have. But they also have players that helped cement the level of maturity. And by the way, for the stat folks out there, it was 30-7 first down advantage for Virginia. But they clobbered William & Mary. I mean, this team could hardly move the ball at any point when the game actually mattered. They would go for it on fourth down. I don't blame William & Mary. They didn't get it because they don't have the advantage in the trenches the way Virginia does, with even both starting tackles have been out with injuries and one of their backups. Virginia, they have still found a way to work around all that, which speaks, I mean, if you have that kind of depth and ability, you're clearly pumping financial resources in, given the value and scarcity of offensive linemen in the transfer portal and how guys are fetching over $1 million regularly. Whether you like it or not, that's what they're fetching. But even with that, there's a level of maturity that you don't often have. And that's where so much of this has to be giving credit to Virginia. How good are they? I don't think we really know. But how mature are they? I think they absolutely answer that call in a very positive way. As Tony Elliott mentioned afterwards, when you have this many transfers, on the fact that they were able to play to a standard as opposed to just the opponent.
So what we've seen over the last 8 months with this group, to me, is been phenomenal. And y'all know that I was probably one of the biggest skeptics of kind of where college football was heading with the transfer portal and, building a roster that way. And but this has been an exceptional group of young men that have won me over, right? From the way that they've come together and the way that they practice, the way that they push each other, the way that they cheer for each other. And so, the expectation was that they were going to come out and play to the standard, and then they were going to hold each other accountable. And I think that's what you saw for a good portion of the game.
Look, I think there's a lot of justifiable skepticism about Virginia. I don't know how much will get answered against Stanford this week. Cardinal looked better against Boston College, but that may just be BC's weird loss on the road in a dead environment out in Palo Alto last week, although they should be familiar with playing in listless environments, considering Chestnut Hill is not much of an exciting atmosphere when it comes to college football, although the ACC powers that be clearly overlooked that when they brought them into the conference, as they have done for a lot of teams, apparently. But for Virginia to not worry about all that and to just play to where you're capable of, that's the performance Virginia is capable of. How good is it? What does it mean against Florida State in a couple of weeks or Louisville on the horizon or other teams? That's still it's reasonable to be skeptical of that when it comes to Virginia. I think it's fair. But when it comes to the fact that they at least played to the standard, that is a step in the right direction in and of itself, because they really have not done that and have not shown off the ability to do that going forward. Speaking of Virginia, that's part of what we get to discuss right now in
It's time for Fast Five at Five-ish. 5-ish minutes on 5 relevant topics done around 5 p.m.-ish. Ish, because our counting skills are kind of ish. Let's start with number 5.
Virginia linebacker Cam Robinson practicing and expected to play this week, according to football coach Tony Elliott. Yesterday, the linebacker will give a big boost to Virginia. Long, rangy, athletic. I mean, let's be real. If Virginia doesn't have the financial investment they have this offseason, that guy would have been off to the Big Ten or the SEC, given how skilled he is, but yet Virginia keeping him around. Also, safety Antonio Clary and defensive end Mekhi Buchanan should be available Saturday against Stanford. It's good news for Virginia. They should be able to win this game without those players, but that is still a positive for Virginia that they have those players back and additional resources. Meanwhile, we could have seen this coming. Georgia Tech was fined for rushing the field after beating Clemson on Saturday afternoon. $50,000. I mean, if it's going to happen once per year, is there even anything wrong with that? Like, I get it from a safety standpoint. I also understand when you're serving alcohol at these venues because you need to find a way to generate more
dollar bills, y'all.
There is that level of reality. But I think a lot of schools, to an extent, maybe not regularly would take it, but if anything, here's kind of where I look at it. $50,000 is it doesn't happen to us very often. So when we get a big win, we can rush the field once. But more than that, when you start getting into the 150, 200, 300,000, first of all, I don't think the fans really care. They're being asked to pay more money anyway to these schools. And a lot of them accept that that's not only felt when they buy their tickets and their concessions at the venue, but just what they're being asked for. But, you get higher up. That's when, you also should be more used to getting these victories. I get the reality of it. Although Georgia Tech accomplishes what they want, they may get another crack against Georgia later this season. Meanwhile,
number 3.
Trey touched on this yesterday in the morning warm-up with Lake Lewis. It's a great interview and some great insightful commentary of the NFL reporter for sportsjourney.com and does some other work as well. But about Tom Brady, who was caught wearing a headset during the Raiders' Monday Night Football loss, which you may not have seen because you were listening on your home for the Virginia, on your home for that, the VTR and Sports app. But because this Sunday, our game is the Rams in Philadelphia, you might be listening to that while you are watching the Raiders Commanders in that 1 o'clock time slot Sunday. And Tom Brady, I think it's reasonable to say this is a bad look in the NFL. The NFL announced that Brady is prohibited from going to team facilities or practices or production meetings now, but he is allowed to sit in the coach's booth, according to league sources. I just think the fact that he even got that insight earlier is something that should make the Commanders fans skeptical, because they had Brady around week 1. If there are any injuries that have gotten more exacerbated, more on that in a moment, it can be a real concern. So that's where I look at this and go, oh, this is a real concern if you're the Washington Commanders or anybody else when it comes to player availability. Meanwhile, speaking of injuries in the Washington Commanders,
Number 2.
Washington Commanders quarterback Jaden Daniels suffered a knee injury in the loss to the Green Bay Packers, and his status is uncertain for the game against the Raiders. It is believed to be a week-to-week injury, but Dan Quinn said he did not practice today, said that Daniels threw on a field, had a, quote, good rehab session, end quote, and that they will, quote, know more, end quote, on Friday about Jaden Daniels' status. When I combine that with the fact that it's early in the season, the Commanders have 1 win, they might be able to beat the Raiders without Jaden Daniels. I think it'll be a much tighter game. Jaden Daniels literally is a difference maker in those. But you combine all that with Marcus Mariota as the quarterback who met with the media today, that's where I go, I would put Jaden Daniels closer to doubtful than probable if you're going based on where he practiced and participated, Luke, as from the injury report. And you wanted to weigh in on this.
I was thinking that he might end up playing just because he's a competitor, but Mariota as a backup isn't a bad go-to either. If you had some no-name back there who's not as experienced, it'd be a different story. But
for 1 game, I'm an Eagles fan. I wasn't overly wowed by Mariota, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt in this sense. It's the Raiders whose defense is transitioning to what Pete Carroll wants, longer, lankier, so they don't always have a lot of the players in the same build that's there. This is where if the Commanders' offseason additions are what they say they are, Tunsil at left tackle, Deebo Samuel as a wide receiver, Bill Merritt, Trey's guy, Bill, from the running back room. If you believe all these guys, this is the type of game where they can elevate you enough, combined with the defense that has actually looked pretty good the first couple games of the year, to go, okay, there's something here with the Washington Commanders. Meanwhile,
Number 1.
after a walk-off win yesterday in Sunday in extras, the Lynchburg Hillcats imploded yesterday and lost in their second game, battling Columbia, the Fireflies, for the Carolina League Championship. It's a winner-take-all matchup tonight. We'll hear this more when we're talking about Liberty later this week. But for road teams in an environment like this, starting fast is so critical. And it's one of the curious things that we'll see about the Lynchburg Hillcats. We'll be able to put a bow on their season tomorrow in the fast lane, however this game goes. But starting fast is the key. I'll say this, as much transition as the roster has had, Jordan Smith, the manager, who was named manager of the year in the Carolina League, has deserved the accolades he's gotten for pushing the right buttons. This is a chance to really cap that off. Meanwhile, when we return in the fast lane, we'll go back to our conversation about the memo issued for the Jug Bowl and reminding fans to be safe and on their best behavior. Somebody who's been to many of them, Ben Cates of NewsAdvance.com, will join us next here in the fast lane on the VTRN Sports app and ask that smart speaker, open VTRN Sports.
It's so worth the drive to big savings at the Used Car Superstore on the Sheeler Motor Mile. Shop local and save more with exceptional service and selection. Your search stops here with over 900 pre-owned vehicles to choose from, plus a huge selection of new car brands in Southwest Virginia. Honda, Hyundai, Toyota, Subaru, Kia, Chevrolet, Mitsubishi, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram. 11 new car brands, 900 used vehicles, all in one location. The Sheeler Motor Mile gives you more choices with pre-owned cars, trucks, vans, and SUVs. Many have miles in the teens, remaining factory warranties, and some are even local one-owner vehicles. More than any other dealer in the area, plus exceptional service, selection, savings, and financing options, and top dollar for your trade. Volume selling means volume pricing, and we've got the volume with 11 new car brands and over 900 used vehicles, all in one location. And we're proud to support our local schools and community. The Used Car Superstore on the Sheeler Motor Mile, your premier car dealer, locally and family-owned for over 50 years. I-81 exit 118C in Christiansburg. Call 866-SHEELER1. Always open at Sheeler.com.
You've heard how easy it is to get life insurance on the radio and internet. But what they don't say is you may not be getting the very best rate. If you've been needing to buy life insurance, why not buy it from your JF sponsor, Andy Matthews, located right here in Lynchburg. You'll get the truth about buying life insurance, and you will have an agent who can discuss options that are right for your family. Contact Andy Matthews, a licensed Erie Family Life agent. With over 33 years of experience, Andy Matthews is your go-to agent for life insurance. In most things, it's hard to go from ordinary to extraordinary. It's easy with your home or business. Call the Concrete Wizard and transform your place into an extraordinary space. If you're tired of looking unsightly concrete, then bring light to your old surfaces. Call the Concrete Wizard for free design consultations, free estimates, and fast professional concrete resurfacing. And visit theconcretewizard.com for ideas from other before and after photos.
Love the outdoors, but not the bugs or dealing with the weather? Call Collins Custom Builders today to plan your sunroom or screen porch. Vaulted ceilings and windows all around, we can help you design your dream space to enjoy the outdoors while staying comfortable. Our customers have relied on us for 35 years to provide the best in service and materials. See some of our projects online at collinscustombuilders.com. Plan early and call today for your free estimate.
Feel the excitement, experience the intensity. Castle Coliseum comes alive when Hokie basketball takes the
He
court.
made it on 1 foot. Lead. It's down.
From buzzer beaters to hard-fought battles, Virginia Tech men's and women's basketball takes on the toughest teams in the ACC.
Up and in. Here come the Hokies. Castle erupts.
Don't just hear about it, be there. Tickets on sale now at Hokiesports.com. Hi, this is Zach Mackey, the voice of Virginia Tech men's basketball. You're listening to The Fast Lane with Ed Lane and Trey Lyle. Join the chat at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram.
So we're waiting for Ben Cates of newsadvance.com, and if it gets a little crazy today to try to get a hold of him, we will go back tomorrow to try to get with Ben Cates to talk about the Jug Bowl and the implications of this matchup, which is pretty exciting, which we'll see how that ends up going. Again, I kind of outlined my idea. In a perfect world, rivalry matchups are at the end of the year. And you'd have Brookville versus Rustburg. That's a Campbell County rivalry. Glass and Heritage, that's Lynchburg City. Liberty and Bedford, or Liberty and JF, which is in the greater Bedford area. And then you'd have LCA against Amherst in the, I guess they got to play each other at some point type matchup. But I get why the Jug Bowl in particular has lobbied to be earlier in the year when there is less at stake. Also, it's lighter earlier at kickoff, which can make security measures easy. And I hate that we have to talk about it, but it's the reality of that particular matchup. So to me, it's making the best of what that situation is. And some rivalries, need a more cooling off period. Like, I'll use college football as an example of this. I wish Virginia Tech and West Virginia played regularly. It's fantastic. I grew up going to those games. My first college football experience that I remember. Well, the first one I remember was Miami against Virginia Tech, which has always been like a rivalry of respect. We covered that game in greater depth, even with Miami being infinitely better than Tech this year. We'll do that again. Uncle Luke Campbell, the championship centers on 3 of the 5 teams have been with us with Brett Romberg and Kelvin Harris. So we've got a great history covering that rivalry and a unique level of insight and access, in particular in the fast lane for that. But a lot of the reason why they've come on with us is there's always a level of respect in that rivalry between Tech and Miami. So different in programs, but respect. Tech and West Virginia are kind of similar. Let's just call it what it is. Maybe not as much now, but back in the day in particular. They're more country folks, raw and real, backwoods for the backyard brawl portion of West Virginia. But it's part of what makes the rivalry as passionate as it is. But it got heated for a while. There were times where Virginia Tech would go to Morgantown, and I've heard stories, and you might have as well if you've been in the area long enough, from different Virginia Tech players who've been in that rivalry in Morgantown, and there were edicts at the very end of it, which is put your helmets on as soon as you leave the tunnel and get onto the field, and do not take them off because you might be pelted in the head with batteries. So that's the reality of a rivalry like that. And sometimes a cooling off period happens. They had to get a full-fledged one, and I wish they'd play more often. I know they've tried. They haven't quite worked it out. I love how the backyard brawl is back as well, so I think that's cool. But the Glass Heritage rivalry is extremely heated. If there are ways to work around it without having to suspend it, and they shouldn't, they're in the Seminole District for crying out loud. They need it just for raw district standings. Playing it at the beginning of the year, again, I'd love the rivalry between JF or for Heritage and Glass to be at the end of the year. But I'm cool with it being at the beginning of the year. There's a different level of intensity of wanting to start district play on the right foot. So there is still something to play for intensity-wise, not like it's just buried in the middle of the regular season, but it doesn't have that same level at the end of the year of, oh my goodness, if we lose, we might not make the playoffs or our seeding can be hurt. And for a rivalry like that, I think it's very, very important. Ben Cates, newsadvance.com, has covered many a Jug Bowl and is with us today here in the Fast Lane. Ben, great speaking with you. Am I off base or onto something that in a perfect world, you could play the JF Liberty, the Heritage Glass, the Brookville-Rustburg rivalries, the kind of intra-city, inter-county rivalries at the end of the year. But if you have to pivot, this is a really good alternative to having the Jug Bowl at the beginning of the year where there still is something at stake, but it's a lot more seemingly amicable atmosphere around what is very rarely an amicable rivalry.
Hey, Ed, thanks for having me. Yeah, I just finished up at EC Glass, so there may be a little noise in the background there. The pep band is practicing behind me, so I'm in my car. But it's extremely interesting that the game happens at the time of year that it's happening. There have been years where Heritage and Glass played the first game of the year, and just from a strictly from a standpoint of like you want to see both teams be in the best shape they can be in. That's not ideal. And I personally, I don't think this time of the year is ideal. I think there are a lot of people who would like to see this game be, late October, early November, if possible. But the schedule is what it is. And you have to go out there and play whether you're ready or not. So you better be ready. And then, to your point, I think it is an interesting time to play the game simply because your first district game, it shows a lot of what you will have going forward in district play. District play at the top of the Seminole District, as usual, is going to be really, really tough this year. Jefferson Forest, Heritage, EC Glass, LCA, there are going to be teams that jump up and surprise you. Brookville might be one of those teams. It's going to be a grind for a lot of these teams every single week. And so this game, could kind of, it's interesting to see such a rivalry game happen because all the guys are just going hardcore. And so you hope that you would avoid the injuries, but it's going to really tell a lot about what both teams have.
It no doubt is. By the way, I love the band in the background. You can crack the windows if you need some fresh air, Ben, while you're there. We can get that ambiance of high school football captured as you're at Glass, getting that part of the story covered as you and Bryson Gordon are loaded up with Jug Bowl coverage at newsadvance.com. And we appreciate you making some time for us today in the Fast Lane. I brought up the point of the timing of the rivalry as well. I mean, look, it's funny. I got to notice our kids go to Bedford Hills Elementary School, so we get all these Lynchburg City schools notices, and they sent one out about sportsmanship guidelines today. 3 weeks into the season, this is when it's sent out. And I'm not saying it's accidental. I'm saying it's probably intentional and it's probably smart. But how much of that is the timing of this rivalry where if you have it earlier in the year, there's something to play for, but there may not be quite that level of, oh my goodness, we lost to you and you cost us something. So there's even more trash talk and back and forth than already is going to happen for a heated exchange.
Yeah, I think there's already been a little bit of that trash talk. Whether it's kids are kids. I don't know that that's a way to explain it, but they're gonna say things that either they regret right away or that they don't mean to come across as trash talk sometimes. And sometimes it just is straight up trash talk, but it is interesting that you've got warmer weather out there. More people may be inclined to come to the game. It's light earlier. And so, you would expect a big crowd there. And, I think as far as the trash talk goes, a lot of these guys have been good. They've been coached up, and we're kind of in an era now where guys are able to kind of zone all of that out and just focus on the game. And that's not always the case, but when it comes to the Glass Heritage rivalry with the coaches that are in these teams right now, usually have their guys zoned in. And so we'll see how that plays out.
How much of an advantage is it for Heritage? Not that you wanted to lose last year, but there are a lot of players who were on the Pioneers last year. And the expectation was they were a better team than EC Glass, but give the Hilltoppers credit. They shocked shocked Heritage last year in the Jug Bowl to put a positive on what was a disappointing by Hilltopper standards season. How much has that captured the attention of Heritage this week, wanting to exact some level of revenge, but needing to keep their composure doing that?
Man, I'll tell you this, like, it was the fact that Heritage, has been pretty successful against Glass in the Brad Bradley era, going back, 13 years now, 14. And so I'll tell you this, it was extremely difficult for Heritage last year going into that game to talk about how they lost the year before. And, all the talk was, we can't let that happen again. So the fact that it did happen, and frankly, when we have a Glass kid that said we shocked everybody, they really did. That's not an exaggeration. I don't think anybody outside of Glass's orbit kind of thought that was going to happen last year, that Glass was going to come in and it was going to be, the type of close game, low scoring that it was. Heritage just looked like the much better team, not only on paper, but having seen them several times up to that point. It was just really obvious that Heritage, in my view, and pretty much everybody else, was gonna win that game. But it's just a testament to the rivalry. When people say you can throw all the records out the window, blah blah blah, usually that's kind of coach speak or whatever. But it's really true in this rivalry. It has been for quite a while. There have been years, where it has been a blowout either way. But those years are usually pretty few and far between.
Oh, heck yes, that's the band at EC Glass in the background with Ben Cates of NewsAdvance.com. He is bringing us the energy and ambiance of covering high school football in the fall, and we appreciate that, Ben. We will wrap it up on this, by the way. Your article, it's Jug Bowl week and sports in Lynchburg are booming. We can get to the 10-miler. We can get to the Hilltoppers in greater depth, but how underrated is this a time in the Hill City with everything that's going on, not to mention the surrounding areas with high school football and high school sports?
It's pretty interesting. You can go back to the past few weeks about, how Lynchburg Hillcats have been on a run. We've had high school football getting started, teams being out of state, playing out of state for kind of for the first time in their history. It's been a really interesting time for that. But then now when you add the Hillcats going for a Carolina League championship, when you add Liberty hosting JMU and a huge crowd expected there, and then when you talk about the 10-miler coming up in a week and a half, I mean, it's just a really exciting time for Lynchburg right now. And, I know one guy who's, is preparing for the 10-miler that it always has a really good showing at that. He's trying to get in shape too. So good luck to him going forward, but you'll do a great job. But yeah, it's just a super exciting time. And I think, when you add the Jug Bowl into that, it's that much more heightened, and it's good for Lynchburg, frankly.
It definitely is. We can look forward to those events and look back on some. Hillcats Championship Game 3 winner take-off for the Carolina League is tonight, so we can look back on that next week. We can look forward to the 10-miler. We can look back on the Jug Bowl and look forward to other Seminole and Dogwood District football action next week with Ben Cates of NewsAdvance.com. Ben, love catching up with you. Keep up the great work, you and Bryson Gordon at NewsAdvance.com, and look forward to seeing you again out somewhere soon, although I'm sure you both will be at the Jug Bowl and not over in Bedford for JF Liberty.
Yeah, we will be. We got JF last week at Mount Airy. That was super fun and good to see you down there. And thanks for having me on.
It's our pleasure. Ben Cates of NewsAdvance.com with us here in the Fast Lane. We will pivot from that, and when we return, we will discuss JMU at Liberty with Renee Ngolio, who will be on the call. Plus, we will ask him a question about the Virginia Tech coaching search next here in the Fast Lane.
The Drive into Fall sales event is on at Magic City Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Bedford. Looking for financing as low as 0%? It's yours when you drive home in a 2025 Jeep Grand Cherokee with 3-row seating, or choose a brand new 2025 Ram 1500 and get 0% financing for 72 months. Huge savings are here at the Drive into Fall sales event at Magic City Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Bedford, 1750 Independence Boulevard, MagicCityBedford.com. The Brew Credits dealer for details. Ends 9/30/25.
Warm weather means traveling. Hi, I'm Randy Trost from Trost Law with a couple of safety reminders. Always wear your seatbelt. Don't drive distracted or impaired. And remember, it's better to safely arrive a little later than being in an auto accident. Those things can make a big difference between a fun family trip or a painful alternative. At Trost Law, I hope you never need our services, but if you do, we're here to help you at 777-HURT or trostlaw.com.
Hey, small to medium business owners, if you're frustrated with slow IT support, high costs, or paying for services you just don't use, it's time for a change. Hi, I'm Colt with We Fix Stupid Computers. We provide reliable on-site and remote support tailored for businesses just like yours. And we go beyond just fixing problems. We empower your staff with real tech knowledge so they can work smarter every day. From repairs to training to full IT support, we save you time, stress, and money. Call We Fix Stupid Computers, 434-525-8590, where smart support meets real savings.
Hi, this is Bill Roth, voice of Virginia Tech football. You're listening to The Fast Lane with Ed Lane and Trey Lyle. Join the chat at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram.
He has seen some of our teams in the Commonwealth. He will see 2 more this coming weekend, and we will preview that momentarily with Renee Ngolia of ESPN, who will be on the call for JMU at Liberty. By the way, those tickets still remain 65% off the list price at InsaneRadioDeals.com. It's sold out. Where else are you going to get tickets? Anywhere, much less a deal like that. And we've only got a handful left. So shop 24/7 at InsaneRadioDeals.com for those JMU Liberty tickets and season tickets and other games as well at InsaneRadioDeals.com. Now, to the matchup in just a moment, but we welcome in our next guest, Renee Ngolia, with us in the Fast Lane. Renee, first of all, one of our big focal points of discussion today in the Fast Lane, in light of Virginia Tech and Brent Pry separating after the disastrous loss to Old Dominion this past weekend, is it's fun to do coaching searches. I read those articles. I'm sure you will be checking all that out as well. But with this being so early in the coaching search process, plus the potential for a shakeup at the athletic director position at Virginia Tech, nothing official, but there's a potential for that. Is it worth Hokie fans knowing that it's fun to look at those coaching searches, but don't overly invest in who might be more likely than else when we don't even know where the decisions are being made?
No, I mean, you're 100% right. I mean, Virginia Tech fires so early, but then so does UCLA. So you got 2 major programs, right, trying to get a head start on it. Listen, Virginia Tech is an unbelievable program. The facilities, I've been up there a couple times. I've called a couple spring games with Bill Roth. It's a tremendous program, so they'll find the right person. The issue is now, right, the world we live in, it's money, right? It's like, can you pony up enough to get the coach you want? And then it's rev share, too. You got to get the players in there, so there's a lot going on. But I do think they've made the right decision, because if you're going to move on, don't be wishy-washy about it. Go ahead and do it, and then start that search early and try to target someone that you think can come back and get Virginia Tech back to the glory days that the fans are used to there.
Very good point. And, there are a lot of processes. There's time. It will get more competitive because there'll be other coaching searches that pop up, some that may be more obvious than others, but inevitably that's how this thing goes. But I mean, you saw what happened Saturday night against Old Dominion, and you got to credit the Monarchs because Ricky Ronnie, sensed blood in the water, and he had his team prepared, and they jumped out to a 28-0 lead. But the way that thing unfolded is at the point where, you hate to call for somebody to be fired, but it's really hard to overcome that when we saw what we saw on Saturday and building that upon what happened to Virginia Tech with the second half against Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I mean, when you lose to a Group of 5 program, and Old Dominion's been a good program, but, as of late, kind of mediocre, but you lose to a Group of 5 program in your state, that's not going to go over well, and then the 0-3 start. So just, it probably could not have started, it could not have started worse for Virginia Tech this season, and so they moved quickly. So, I applaud the powers to be, again, not wishy-washy. They made a move, and now they'll get a national search going. And to your point, there's a lot of coaches that are coaching with teams right now that will end up, being candidates there. So there's no doubt they're going to try to circle the wagons and get the best coach in there to get this program back to where everyone's used to seeing it.
Renee Ngolia with us here in the Fast Lane. He'll be on the call for JMU at Liberty, and I promise we'll get to that in a moment because once we start discussing it, it's going to be really hard to back off of that. But one observation that jumped out to me, and I know you haven't seen them in person yet this year, but Virginia and William and Mary, I was at that game in Charlottesville this past weekend, and what jumped out to me is both teams. William and Mary look smaller, like a team that we're seeing where, one AA FCS programs, and even to an extent Group of 5, where they are in the pecking order. Meanwhile, Virginia, when they put their resources to work, oh my goodness, that looks like a much different, much bigger, thicker, and more athletic roster than they've had in quite a long time. Is that a reasonable observation that what we're seeing now is there's even greater in terms of a disparity for how programs like that are structured?
No, absolutely. You're on the money. And I tell people all the time, like, yeah, you want good coaches that get X's and O's, right? And scheme up, but it's more than the X's and O's. It's the Jimmies and the Joes. You need to get dudes in there. You need to get players in. And the one thing the transfer portal has done, it has spread talent around the nation because guys want to start. They don't want to be backups. They can jump in the portal. They're going to schools. But what it's really hurt is the smaller programs, the FCS schools like a William & Mary, because I talk to coaches each and every week, and if you're a Group of 5 program or a Power 4 program, it doesn't matter. If you can get an FCS kid that maybe started for 2-3 years, he's all conference, some of them are all American, they got passed over for whatever reason. Now they're a proven, commodity. They've done it. They've got a ton of reps under the belt. Those schools would love to take them in the transfer portal over maybe that kid that's bounced around in the P4 that really hasn't played, right? They love those kids. And for that reason, I think the FCS teams have struggled a lot, maintaining their rosters.
It's very true, and it's the reality of where programs are right now that talent is funneling upwards. I'm seeing it now with kids that play at local sports in the area where they might have been developmental projects at a bigger school in prior years. Now all of a sudden, hey, go to a lower level and physically mature and develop. And if you do, then we'll call on you when you're ready. Is that the reality from a recruiting standpoint, Renee, that it's going to be harder to get those flyers for a program, even a Virginia or a Duke or a Wake Forest? Those schools, they're even more likely to take transfers. So it's less likely you could latch on there in that developmental capacity.
100%. And I have a family friend. I won't name the school. He plays Group of 5 college football, defensive player. And, he's one of those players that was kind of borderline, could have got a scholarship to P4, preferred walk-on. And the smaller Group of 5 school came in and said, listen, we're going to give you a scholarship. Come here, develop 1-2 years. If you're good enough to go somewhere else, we'll actually help you go and move on. And that's the reality that a lot of these coaches are understanding now. It's not personal anymore. There's money involved. So if you can recruit a guy, keep him for 1 or 2 years, and then let him go on, at least you have him for 2 years. Now, it kind of stinks because, you put your heart and soul in developing players, and then you pass them on to another program. I made a comment the other day, getting back to the transfer portal, it looks like they're going to get away from that second transfer portal. I think they're going to vote it out and just have the one, because that second portal after spring, teams think, okay, or coaches think my team's set for fall camp, and then all of a sudden SEC, Big Ten says, you know what? Let's go shopping. We have the money. Let's see what we need after spring ball. It's been disastrous for a lot of programs.
No doubt. And I wouldn't call it disastrous for Liberty, but you'll be on the call for JMU and Liberty. Renee Ngolia with ESPN will be on the call for that 3:30 kick on ESPNU this coming Saturday. But the Flames are an example of that. I know their run defense is not in a perilous spot. If their offense had that consistency and execution, they might even be in a better spot right now. We'll call a spade. But how much of what you've seen out of Liberty is also because that spring window hit them hard. They lost defensive tackle Jay Hardy. They lost defensive end TJ Bush, among other players. And, not to say they can't transfer or wouldn't at some point, but one window and they might be looking at a different team.
Well, and I'll even back it up farther for you, Ed. I did the Bahamas Bowl that they were in. They were depleted in that bowl game against Buffalo. I mean, a ton of guys had already moved into the portal and decided not to play in the bowl. And then, to your point again, they get hit in that spring window, and it's just not a Jamie Chadwell issue. That's the reality of a lot of programs. So at least if they can stop that spring portal, coaches have a fighting chance. Say, listen, this is my team. I know what I have coming into camp, but it's hurt them. But really, the first 2 games for them, for Liberty, I mean, turning the ball over. They have 6 turnovers in 2 games, 2 losses against no takeaway. So you're -6 turnover ratio. You've given the ball back on downs a few times too, and you're just not going to win. I mean, watching them on film, it's amazing they've only lost those games by 10 points. And then, of course, big penalties have killed them. When you have 2 long touchdowns taken off the board from penalties, you're just not going to win. So they got to clean that up for sure. And then there's some kicking issues they have to clean up as well. And so we'll see. But, 2 losses in a row, Liberty fans aren't accustomed to seeing that the last few years.
No, they're not. As Renee Angolia is with us in the fast lane, he's seen plenty of Liberty. He'll see them against JMU this coming weekend. You mentioned Liberty. One thing that struck me, and I get it, is the idea that if you can clean up mistakes, the scheme seems to be justifiable. Bowling Green's announcer, I was listening to the radio broadcast on my way back from the William & Mary, Virginia game on Saturday, and they were even mentioning that, look, the scheme was actually putting Liberty's running game in a position to make plays and their passing game, but the mistakes, whether it's turnovers or penalties, were so costly that it set them back and totally reset things. Is that a reasonable observation that if Liberty can clean that up, all of a sudden they may look like an entirely different team against the Dukes on Saturday?
Absolutely. That was a game when I watched that Bowling Green game. That's a game Liberty should have won, but Nick should have, could have, would have, right? They didn't do it. Way too many mistakes. The penalties, and I agree with Jimmy. Jimmy Chadwell was really good. Some of those penalties were on his players. Like, you just can't throw guys down. There were some real bad holding calls. There was also some iffy calls that the officiating crew made where I thought, wow, that really hurt them. But guess what? That's part of the game. Their scheme, I mean, this coaching crew of Jamie Chadwell and his assistants, I mean, they go back to the success they had at Coastal Carolina. I mean, they've been around a while. I've called a bunch of their games. Their scheme on offense, they have the pieces. Ethan Vasco, the quarterback, can run. He can throw. They have the pieces there. They just have to clean up those mistakes. And if they do that, I think they'll be fine. But with that said, that JMU team had really good defensive front. Even though they lost to North Carolina State 2 weeks ago, 28-14, that score was misleading. That defensive front is physical. They played really well. And that's a game they could have won on the road for sure. If some things, the ball bounced a different way for them.
Yeah, it is. And you mentioned that, but you're talking about JMU almost knocking off Louisville as we're chatting with Renee Angolia, who's going to be on the call for JMU Liberty 3:30 this Saturday from Lynchburg on ESPNU. JMU, how much of the difference for them is, yes, they've worked Matt Sluka in at quarterback with Alonzo Barnett, but the fact that you've got Barnett, who's been in this offense before, as your potential fallback if this all falls apart, what advantage is there in terms of continuity that JMU that they have this year that, it's very hard to find in Group of Five? And frankly, if JMU, they succeed this year, they could lose a lot when the end of the season arrives.
I'll be honest. I don't like what I saw, what Bob Chesney did with the quarterbacks. Now, listen, he's the head coach. He's going to make his decision. It blew my mind in Coach Chesney's press conference. Not one media member asked him about using the 2 quarterbacks. And it's not even using the 2 quarterbacks. I mean, he was subbing them in and out during the same drive. And to myself, I just say, man, how do you get into any continuity? Now, I will say this. Alonzo Barnett, as you may know, and your listeners know, he tore his ACL the last offensive play of the last game of the season last year. I don't think they believed he was going to be ready to go because that is a pretty devastating injury. They go out and get Matthew Saluka, who obviously played for Bob Chesney in Holy Cross, and then famously, or maybe infamously, is known for what happened to UNLV, shutting it down after 3 games after an NIL dispute. So now he has Saluka in, but all of a sudden Barnett gets cleared to play. So he's probably like, okay, I got both these guys. I'm going to use them both. Listen, if it was my call, again, Alonzo Barnett, unless he's not 100%, which I haven't spoken to him yet, so I'll find out. But that's a 2,600-yard passer, 26 TDs against only 4 interceptions last year. I mean, that's a hell of a season for Barnett. Now you're splitting time. I almost think, okay, let Barnett go, and let's have some packages for Saluka. But I just think the way they sub them in and out, neither of the quarterbacks, to me, from what I saw, could get into a really good flow.
Renee, we'll wrap it up with this in the fast lane. W227BG, Timberlake, WVGM, Lynchburg, WMNA, Gretna, Downville, Southside, and the VTRN Sports app on VTRN Sports, powered by ESPN Radio. And that being this, when we make our predictions, I see why the line went from 7 to 9.5. Now it's back to 8.5, but why it's gone in JMU's favor. And we're not trying to get people to bet on this as much as just figure out how the game's going to flow. I see the logic in that. Liberty self-inflicted mistakes. JMU could be 3-0 with an impressive win against Louisville. But am I reasonable to believe that I'm not quite ready to say Liberty's going to win the game outright, but if they just clean things up, this could be a real fun one and a real interesting one Saturday over at Williams Stadium.
Absolutely. And even though it's not a conference game, it's this new, budding rivalry, if you will. They're only 95 miles apart. They scheduled this thing out to 2040, which is awesome. They're going to play 10 times over the next 15 years. And Liberty's backs are against the wall. They don't want to lose 3 in a row before you jump back into conference play with Old Dominion, Old Dominion Sunbelt, but another in-state team. And so it can really cascade on you. So Liberty's backs are against the wall. They are a better team than they showed early on. If they clean up the mistakes, I'm with you. I think this is a much tighter game than maybe Las Vegas would have you believe.
We look forward to it. It should be a fun one. We'll see you over at Williams Stadium Saturday, Renee. Travel safely, be well, and thank you so much for joining us in the Fast Lane.
Thanks, Ed. My pleasure, buddy.
Our pleasure. Renee Angolia joining us today in the Fast Lane. That does it for us today on to ESPN Radio or on the VTRN Sports app powered by ESPN Radio, already in progress.
Headquarters of ESPN and the ESPN studio in New York.
Let's do it.
This is Freddie and Harry.
We go to north or the border. That is the home of Mike in Canada. Big Mike, kick off the safe space.
Yeah, I just wanted to